The biggest suppressor ruling in decades just happened. But before you get too excited, let's answer the biggest question of all. Did the National Firearms Act finally end? Can we now buy suppressors without paperwork? Unfortunately, the answer is no. This does not mean Silencer Shop and the other plaintiffs are suddenly selling suppressors tomorrow with no paperwork or Form 4s. It does not mean the NFA is gone. It does not mean suppressors are deregulated. And it does not mean everyone can suddenly ignore the ATF. So, what actually happened? For nearly a century, suppressors have been regulated under what's known as the National Firearms Act. The NFA wasn't written as an outright ban. Instead, in 1934, Congress used its taxing power to regulate suppressors and other NFA items. It imposed a $200 tax stamp, which in today's currency is $5,000 with inflation, and they paired it with a federal registration and approval process. The idea was simple: make it extremely difficult and expensive to own NFA items. That tax became the constitutional foundation for the entire NFA system. Fast forward to January 1, 2026, Congress reduced the suppressor transfer tax to $0. That raised a very simple but powerful question. If the tax is now zero, can the government still rely on its taxing power authority to require the registration system built around that same tax? Silencer Shop, the Silencer Shop Foundation, and other plaintiffs challenged exactly that. That's why this is such a huge victory. But here's the part almost nobody is explaining. The 7-day stay. The judge didn't just let his ruling take effect immediately. He issued a 7-day stay. Think of it as hitting the pause button. The ruling exists, the judge has spoken, but he temporarily paused his own order to give the DOJ time to respond. Go figure. They're probably going to appeal. So the DOJ can now ask the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals to keep everything on hold while the appeal moves forward. That's why nothing changes today. Silencer Shop isn't suddenly skipping Form 4s. The ATF is still enforcing the law. Dealers should absolutely continue to follow the current rules exactly as they exist today, including us. So what happens after those 7 days? Path 1, and the most likely path, is that the DOJ asks the Fifth Circuit for another stay while the appeal is heard. If they grant it, nothing changes. Silencer Shop, 2A Daddy, every manufacturer, every dealer, every customer, everyone continues using the existing Form 4 process while the courts work through the case. Personally, I think this is absolutely the most likely outcome, not because anyone won or lost, but because the courts are reviewing a decision that could fundamentally change the entire firearms regulation system. That process can take months and potentially years. Path 2, a less likely path. The 7-day stay expires and the Fifth Circuit does not issue another stay. Things would get very interesting because the plaintiffs would essentially be receiving the benefit of the injunction while the appeal continues. So the obvious question becomes, does Silencer Shop and the other plaintiffs suddenly have a huge competitive advantage? Imagine if a group of suppressor companies could operate under different federal rules while everyone else still had customers waiting through the traditional NFA process. That would be a major advantage. It would also create a major problem. Now you've got competitors playing by different federal rules. I wouldn't expect that situation to last very long. If that happens, I'd expect two things. Number one, the DOJ keeps fighting this case. They are not going down without a fight. I can guarantee you that. The second thing that would happen is I think you would see manufacturers, dealers, distributors, industry groups, and customers across the nation seeking the same relief. If your competitor gets one set of rules while you're stuck with another, you're going to argue that's an unequal treatment or unfair advantage. So what happens next? Assuming path 1 is the most likely path, the Fifth Circuit would hear the case. Their job isn't to decide whether suppressors are good or bad. Their job is to decide whether the district judge got the law right. If they agree, this becomes one of the biggest firearm rulings in modern day history. If they disagree, the plaintiffs can continue appealing. And because this is such a significant constitutional question involving federal law, there's a very real possibility that this reaches the Supreme Court. The process could take months or even years, but the outcome would shape suppressor ownership for decades to come. Congratulations to Silencer Shop, the Silencer Shop Foundation, the other plaintiffs, their legal teams, and everyone who helped bring this challenge to the courts. Whether you are a suppressor owner, a dealer, a manufacturer, or simply someone who believes in protecting the Second Amendment, this is one of the most important legal battles we have seen in decades, and we're here for it.